Hi everyone, welcome back to The Business Edge. I'll be your host, Erin Blake. In this episode, we'll focus on the topic of HR talent. In just a few moments, you'll hear from a panel consisting of 3 HR talent executives gathered to discuss career guidance, navigating the job search, and the role of automation and technology in talent acquisition. Panelists included Ed Bitterle, Chief Talent Acquisition Officer at ADP, Sue Chegwidden, Vice President and Chief Talent Officer at Prudential Financial, and Matt Jahansouz, Managing Director and Global Head of Human Capital Management at Goldman Sachs. Greg Cant, Dean of the Feliciano School of Business at Montclair State University, served as the panel's moderator, facilitating the discussion with questions posed by MBA students.
Sue, the first question is for you.
Okay.
From your assessment, are there key competencies that will be required for most future jobs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd say there's certain things that are table stakes. So leadership, managerial capabilities is always important. High ethical standards, strong moral compass. Recently, we undertook an effort to redesign our leadership programs and interviewed the top 25 executives across the company. And I can tell you consistently 3 things that I heard that are needed for the future that we then incorporated into our leadership programs that we're actually relaunching this month. I'd say customer centricity, test and learn, and speed and agility. And so if you think of what those things mean and how you need to think about how you approach work, your mindset toward them, those are the things that I believe our businesses specifically will need to move us forward. And if you think about our corporate functions, they have to keep up and partner and collaborate with our businesses. So I would say that's the trend of the future.
In terms of agility, tell us a bit more about what agility means in terms of a competency and how you can demonstrate agility.
Yep. So agility means a lot of different things. So people deep in agility, there's a whole mindset around that. And I'm not deep in agility, so I can't speak to that. One measure we do look at across the board, especially when we think of potential for individuals, is learning agility and how somebody is able to quickly adapt and change and learn from new situations. So I would say regardless of being very deep in agility, if you think about how you can gain experiences and then apply them to different experiences to increase your learning agility, that will be very important as you think about your future.
I think maybe just building on top of that, that's a great list, and not to overwhelm people with, the 6 or 7 there, and we'll each add 3 or 4 more on. But problem solving, I think is at the core of any job that you're going to do, whether you're going to be a technologist, whether you're a banker, whether you're working in finance, whether you're working in math or science. Ultimately what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, regardless of, the project that you're working on, is trying to sort through a problem. And so being able to break things down into its component pieces, being able to ask smart and thoughtful questions, being able to draw out insights. There's a number of different things that feed into whether you're an effective problem solver or not. Because more often than not, you're not going to be the expert at the table, particularly as you're starting your career or you're early on in your career. But your ability to get in and try and work through those things and break things down and come up with different options. There's typically not one way to solve a problem. So can you work through that? Can you come up with the pros and the cons? Whether you're a consultant or whether you're working on the corporate side, that's an incredibly important skill, again, regardless of what you're doing. So really think through, there's kind of, there's a methodology to solving a problem, and being able to understand the unique steps within that is something that'll benefit anybody.
I would just add, you all have a distinct advantage. You're all going for your MBA, which is already a big box checked for a future employer to look and say, hey, they're going for more. So that's a big advantage for you. And the other thing I would say is, I believe, are most of you working right now? So you have jobs. Another tremendous advantage. So here's how I would leverage that from a practical point of view. Whatever job you're in, whether you love it or don't love it, you're building for your future in addition to attending school and getting your MBA. So I would say take every opportunity to run to any fire you see inside that company and demonstrate that you can solve or help with that issue, problem, and overcome. and then be able to document that. So as Matt said, you go into interviews now, and Sue said you go into interviews, and being able to document, one, I took the extra effort to get my graduate degree. I worked while I was doing that, which, by the way, tremendous respect for all of you that work, and anybody that has kids and families in the audience. Full-time, MBA at night, and then you go home to a little mayhem. That's tremendous. So again, from a practical point of view, I don't know if you think play offense here. You have a tremendous advantage that you are building for yourselves right now, and we'd be happy to talk to any one of you when you're ready.
So Ed, I want to move on to the impact of technology. Particularly, there's a lot of new artificial intelligence technologies that are likely to be shaping how employers are driving interest in their company, encouraging a strong pool, and then managing that recruitment process. How much has that changed in recent years that technology is an integral part of the recruitment process?
It's changed dramatically, and I'll have Matt and Sue definitely chime in on this one. So I would say, again, we're talking to you, some of the things we talk about tonight, it might be from a candidate's view or your future candidate, but just in general, what's going on out there in the employment world, I will tell you that recruiting, it's a marketing game now. It's not a recruiting game, and that has shifted in the last couple of years. And what that means is really job seekers, where they would a lot of times post on job boards in the past like a monster, that's all done now. It's really, you have the advantage of going career site to career site shopping for jobs, because the career sites are so informational now. There's video content where people are actually doing the job and they can describe it to you on video versus you have to read paragraphs of job content. So all that modernization is occurring. So the headline really is, at ADP, we look at it as a marketing game now. So we have a bucket called sourcing, which is our employer brand, our career site, posting on the job boards, any work we do on our campus leader, Lisa Schmitz over there, sitting in the third row. When we're on campus, looking at all that sourcing work, that's bucket one. All the work we do with sourcing drives inbound candidate traffic into bucket two. That's called our talent community. So our goal as a company is we want to drive tremendous interest and tremendous talent into that talent community. And then what we want to do now then is use technology. So chatbots, recruiting marketing tools like Avature or Smashfly. You probably haven't heard of those. I know this group has. Those are things that can assess talent with technology quickly. You get an evaluation, we get an evaluation, and then we take the best talent and we funnel that down into now our recruiting organization, where you would start to have live contact and start to interview with hiring managers, et cetera. So again, just from a company point of view, leading talent acquisition globally, it's a marketing game now to acquire the best talent you possibly can in every function. Campus, right off campus, MBAs, tech labor, executive labor, sourcing into talent communities, and then the best talent gets funneled into the interview process. I hope so. We're using technology in that middle bucket to assess quickly and then funnel the talent. I'm sure you guys have something to add to that.
And I would say this year, for the first time, we're piloting digital recruiting through HireVue on campus. So we are in the middle of that launch. I met with our head of campus this morning, who said we have digital interviews for hundreds of more students than we have historically when we were going on campus. You know, the intent is to cast a wider net, so we reach people whose campuses we don't go to, greater diversity, remove biases. So we're right in the middle of that, and I'd say that's the future. I don't see us backing away from it. It's more, how can we integrate that differently at some of our entry-level jobs and some of our experienced recruiting. We felt campus was the good place to start, in that your generation has grown up with technology and are very used to FaceTime and doing everything on your phones. Ironically, we have gotten some feedback, my son included, he's a junior, and he underwent a digital interview. It takes some getting used to. So some advice is practice, think about, are offering tools to help people prepare for the digital interviews, and take the time to do that and take an advantage of the tips that you receive, because it's not as simple and straightforward as it might seem, especially even to your generation that's more technology enabled than maybe my generation. But that is going to be the wave of the future, and you will likely experience that when you go look for a new job, potentially, since many of you are employed currently.
And Matt, can I just touch on, I know Goldman will use technology as well, but when we were chatting before, you've also got the other end of the process, especially for kind of mid-level positions where you still have a high-touch environment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? So one end you've got technology, but then that face-to-face culture fit question where you need to interview people.
Yeah, of course. So I think an important point maybe to try and bring all this together is I don't know if many companies here, that the robots are coming, artificial intelligence is going to take over everything. I don't buy into any of that. I actually think what most organizations are trying to do is marry technology with process and people to come to, better, more informed, decisions, right? Technology is about trying to draw insights that you otherwise wouldn't be able to gain and try and drive scale. And so, our goal is, to have, data informed decisions, but ultimately people are doing that. And whether it's our campus process where, it starts with a digital interview, but ultimately ends with multiple, in-person interviews, or if you come in for a lateral position, Goldman's a bit notorious for putting people through 15, 20, 25 interviews. I certainly went through that experience, about 8 or 9 years ago. And it's daunting, and there's going to be certain organizations out there that have, published research. 5 interviews is the, right number of interviews. You've got the decision, from an efficiency perspective, you shouldn't do more than that. And that's fine if your goal is to run the most efficient, kind of cost-effective, model. From a Goldman perspective, our goal is to get to know you as much as possible and to give you the opportunity to get to know us. We're an incredibly consensus-driven organization, and so the goal is always going to be to just try and get, as many different perspectives around the table saying, is Matt actually a good fit? Does he have the right experience? And different people are going to, quite frankly, test you from different angles, and hopefully you're going to get the opportunity to meet with different people. So, certain organizations you're going to go into, be ready for a lot of conversations, take advantage of them as you're working through them, understand who you're talking to, try to figure out why you might be talking to them, from what perspective, if you came into the organization, would you be working with them? And, try and, break things apart from that perspective. But, I think a lot of organizations talk about it, but we'll not get to a point where it's, end-to-end technology making these decisions. They're too important for any organization to be successful. So, really continue to focus in on, those people skills and building relationships and telling your story.
And so maybe to extend that out a little bit. So if you're giving advice to students here, and not everyone is looking for an immediate job, but all of us at some level are looking for a job. I mean, we might not be today, but at some stage we're looking at jobs. And it's a competitive world. What are some, and Ed's already mentioned some of those ways, how can we stand out in that kind of marketplace? Yes, it's great to have got an MBA, but there's a lot of people in this part of the world, and I want to make sure if I'm a candidate, there's things about me that get. Is there a secret sauce, or what kind of advice would you give if the goal is to get to stand out in that marketplace?
Sure. I think one of the best pieces of advice I could share is to be able to tell your story and practice it. I think a lot of times, it might be easy to wing it, or let me just make sure my resume is up to date, and I'll go in and try and build some rapport and work through it and figure it out. Take it seriously. I can tell pretty quickly whether someone's really prepared and put in the time. Have they done their homework? Do they know what's going on in the industry? Do they have a perspective on, the organization? Are they able to answer the question, why would they want to come to Goldman Sachs? Have they thought about their ability to contribute? So being able to piece all that together into a story and, kind of build on the story point. Often, someone will say, I'm very hardworking. I'm a great problem solver. I'm this, I'm that. That's fine if you want to claim that you are those things. The best thing that you can do is actually relay, actual examples of things that you've done or how you would handle certain instances or situations. Tell a story of how you would approach that and demonstrate to me, show me that you're hardworking or that you're a problem solver versus just trying to tell me. I think too often we try and think we've got to check the box because we read the position description that they want these 3 primary things. And so I'll just kind of hit those points. And then be honest. There's going to be certain instances where someone's going to ask you a question, have you done it? If you haven't done it, that's fine. Try and find something similar. Someone will say, have you ever been in this situation? No, but one time I was in a situation that was similar, and, play that off. A lot of organizations are going to ask situational or behavioral questions. Really the definition of those things are either, in certain situations that you've been in before, how have you handled them, or behavioral questions are really, how would you behave in the future if this happened to you? So even just understanding the construct of how an interview is managed, there's science behind this, is important, but tell your story, show it rather than tell it.
I would echo 100% of what Matt said, doing the due diligence and the homework. Obviously, students that have internships in their field or jobs while in school, that helps the candidate bring different level of experience. One thing I would just add is label and link, or link and label. So, we understand in an entry-level situation or where you maybe had one job out of college, how can you demonstrate the skills that we are asking about and label and link them to the question that we want the answer to. And sometimes you have to prepare and think about that, and you'd be surprised of how you're able to actually do that, even if you've worked at an ice cream store or for a carpet company. It doesn't have to be the internship at Prudential or someplace else to get you your first full-time job. It's just making sure you prepare and link and label those things so that you can demonstrate your skills and knowledge.
So there's the takeaway, link and label. Sue, if you don't mind, I understand that Prudential has articulated, I think you call it career principles, which are kind of guides to help employees at various stages of their career. Can you share a little bit with us about what some of those principles are?
Yep. So we recently launched Career Principles. I, prior to my role as the Chief Talent Officer, was an HR business partner for many years at Prudential. And it became somewhat frustrating when employees would come to me and want career advice, but they wouldn't necessarily want advice. They'd want me to tell them what their next job should be. And that's very difficult. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know what passions you have, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And so we typically get asked questions around that and try to coach employees on it, that they needed to think about it. So we created a document. I think there's 7 or 8 principles on it. I'm happy to highlight a few. One I think I just alluded to, which is you own your career. Managers, mentors, sponsors are all there to help you think through it, but you really need to understand what you like, what you dislike, what your strengths are, what you've gone to school for, what you think you might like but went to school for but you realize you don't like, and then how can you translate those experiences you've already had to help you get a job that might be more related to where your passion lies or interest. So at the end of the day, you own your career. One of the other ones, you learn from good and bad experiences. My father told me that when I first started working, I had a very, very nice, kind manager for my first job. And he was like, wow, she's really nice. You're not going to have all good managers. You're going to learn from good ones and bad ones. And it's very true. And you can apply that to situations and experiences you have. So think about those when you're in them. Not all moves are going to be horizontal. Not all moves are going to be vertical. Many are going to be horizontal, and take those opportunities. I've done that in my career where I wanted to switch careers. I didn't initially start in HR, realized I wanted to get into HR, pursued my MBA with a concentration in HR, and then was able to successfully post laterally into a job at the company I was at the time, even though I was counter-offered to stay in the area I was in with a promotion. But I realized my passion lied in HR, and I wanted to move forward with that. So I took advantage of moving laterally as opposed to getting a promotion. And longer term, obviously, it's paid off. 20-something years later, here I am in HR still. Don't do the same experience in disguise. So very easy. Again, I was an HR business partner. I supported groups in corporate. It would be very easy for me to go support one of our businesses as an HR business partner. But instead, I took the chance to move into a talent officer role, supporting broadly the entire company with different functions that I was able to leverage my past experiences, but really gain new ones. So those are a few of the highlights of some of my favorite ones. Happy to share the document with you guys if you're interested in.
Ed, can I ask you a question? It's a unique ADP question. Because like everyone here, your responsibility is to make sure you get the best talent, and that's going to be central to how your organisation thrives. But also, ADP is in the business of producing tools for other people to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you've got tools at different size markets, including the small market, the 1 to whatever you call the small businesses. How are those tools that everyone can use now by going to an ADP or one of your competitors help with managing talent, not just the global companies, but anyone who can afford to buy the tools can access that kind of technology?
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, again, if you know ADP, we're the market leader in human capital management, so anything from payroll all the way through to all parts of running a company and managing the employees at the company. And one of one of those aspects of HCM and human capital management is the recruiting effort. So we actually sell services where companies they'll outsource the recruiting efforts to us. So we do the recruiting for companies. In fact, Matt's a client, and Matt will comment on that in a second. Hopefully, he's a happy client.
There we go.
We had a good discussion before. I think we're.
Now I've got the microphone.
It's either a testimony or not. But so it's cool. So we outsource recruiting efforts. So basically, we would be the recruiter for Matt's company. So we would source the candidates and then send them in to the hiring managers to then finally evaluate. So Matt's team still makes the hiring decisions. We do all the recruiting work. So that's called RPO, recruiting process outsourcing. And believe it or not, which I'm sure you would believe, so I'm a client of that unit inside ADP. We use the RPO, which we sell as a service. I use it for our volume role. So I'm a big client, just like Matt is, to that RPO scenario. And I think, ADP is an outsourcing entity. And that's one of the things we outsource. So Matt, I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think figuring out, those partnerships that are going to allow your company to be, successful and, just work in a way that you otherwise might not be able to do on your own is incredibly important. ADP's been one of those relationships. It actually started your RPO business through the acquisition of The Right Thing,
exactly.
Which was, a small organization that grew up pretty quickly out of Ohio. I remember it was like first, boots on the ground from the Goldman team there in like 2011 in Findlay, Ohio. And, I think we started with 12 coordinators, and now we literally have, probably 200 plus ADP professionals who supplement, our internal recruiting organization. So really being able to figure out, what are the tools, what are the technologies, what are the partnerships that you need to run your business is, a fun part of the job. It's, putting together the puzzle to deliver the optimal solution.
One point on the practical piece, back to you. So you in the business side, what's the advantage, or so what? So the advantage to a company is, why would they outsource that? Is because whether you're small or large, say you need 4 recruiters to keep up with your hiring. If you hired 4 full-time recruiters and that was the flow you needed or volume you needed to get the job done for 8 months, and then all of a sudden your hiring needed to stop for 8 months, you're stuck with what? 4 full-time employees. If you own the business, that's tough. Or if you had to ramp up quickly. So the advantage of coming to us is we own the flex labor model. So if Matt's organization goes heavy, we add more. The pressure's on us to add more people to get the job done for Matt. He can sleep well at night, drive home safely, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the advantage for a business. That's the whole outsourcing concept, right? So it's a good thing for ADP.
Matt, you alluded to before that at Goldman there's a culture that defines the organisation. Can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of recruit for culture, and then you ingratiate people within that culture, because their success is going to be how they fit into the organisation as well as what they achieve?
Sure. So maybe I'll start just by describing the culture a little bit from my own perspective or experience over the course of the last 8-9 years. I think there's certain myths and perceptions, and there may be some truths to those. When you're on the inside, it feels a little bit different, so I'm biased. But, incredibly team-oriented. Kind of the star player culture, doesn't work well. It's consensus-driven, so no matter how smart or talented or ambitious you are, it's quite literally, structured in a way where you can't get things done on your own. No matter who you are, however senior you are, however capable you are, you've got to be able to pull in other folks. It's intense, and I think, that can be portrayed in certain ways as, overly competitive or cutthroat. That's not my own experience. I'm personally a big believer. I'd rather go home, tired on a Friday night than bored on a Tuesday. And, you've got a busy week and you're hustling. But it's the result of just being put together with, almost 40,000, very, kind of supercharged folks. So, when you take all those things together and you're trying to figure out how to come into that culture and be successful, it's hard. It takes time. There's a period where you feel really good, and then you dip down for a little bit, and it takes a while to come back up, because you're just trying to learn how to navigate through it all. So we have mentors and buddies. There's orientation programs and different opportunities to try and survey how are you doing, kind of some nudge intervention to check in on you and kind of encourage you and your manager to do different things. Quite frankly, most of it happens on the desk. I think we try and come up with as much program and process and orientation as possible. I think whenever you go into a large organization with a very strong culture, it takes failure. I think most of my, biggest learnings and wherever I may be now is most likely not the result of a success that I've had, but something that I've struggled with or tripped up on along the way. It's been being able to build relationships with people and being smart about those relationships. Getting people to invest in you, but then also investing in others. If it's not a two-way trade, you're not going to last that long. So there's a lot of institutionalized process around it, but it's ultimately, to your point of like, you've got to own your career. It's on you. We're going to do as much as we can by, when those hard times hit, can you work through it? Can you use, kind of the broader ecosystem around you? It's mostly good days, but there's struggles, and I think working through those is whenever you really realize it's at the right place for you.
Can I get you two particularly to think about the one thing that Matt mentioned, and most of us who've been around a long time probably have said this to you lots, is your deepest learning is when you fail. But does your organisation give a space to fail? I mean, no one can fail over and over again, but how do you encourage failure that results in doing things better as a kind of a cultural question within Prudential and ADP?
So historically, we've been not a company that accepts failure. We are very compliance-driven, risk-oriented, smart risks. We are trying to move to an environment where you have more of a tolerance for failure. And that's where, when I mentioned earlier about test and learn and speed and agility, it's how do you do those A/B tests that you are controlled and you learn from them very quickly, and they're very easy to pull back if they're not working, and the individual's still working at the company the day after. And then how do you create a risk mindset or framework that allows for that, but then doesn't put you at the other end of the spectrum? So we're going through a process right now of looking and trying to define our culture. Prudential is a very prideful culture. I think probably all of the companies we work for have been around for a long time. It's hard to articulate what that culture is. Right. And when you're in it, you're in it. And each of us may describe it differently. We recently announced our chairman is retiring, and we announced a new chairman and vice chairman. Both our chairman and vice chairman are retiring, and they're internal individuals. But we want to talk about how do we think about and plan for the future and embody those competencies that I mentioned earlier. And so we went through something for the first time. Prudential and JAM don't tend to go together. We did a culture jam where 10,000 employees participated, and you were identified, which again is not something Prudential style, where your name is there and you have a comment, and senior leaders were commenting on things, and our chairman was on jamming, and there was comments about performance management, and I got on and responded. And again, you're identifiable. And there was, like I said, 10,000 employees participated domestically. We've not quite gotten there internationally. And then 40 of us were off-site last Thursday to talk about what is the behaviors in our culture now that we want to move forward, and what are the behaviors that we want to create anew to support a test and learn environment, to support smart risks. So evolution as we speak.
Ed, what about at ADP?
Yeah, I'd say on the failure piece, again, I could speak to ADP, is that it's not some failure will happen to everyone. It might not be termed failure, but some challenge, or it might not go exactly the way you wanted. But the key, so that will always happen. And I think that will happen anywhere, quite frankly. I don't know if that's an ADP thing, but I will tell you what happens at ADP. What the key to is a failure or a challenge that doesn't go your way. What we look for and try to help you, what happens after that failure or challenge? How do you respond? How do you react? The people that move forward positively and have the will to keep going and drive to a different direction and pick up the pieces, they really do really well with the company. So that happens all the time. So I see failure as an opportunity, and I believe the company does too. And on the culture piece, similar. We just literally, the time is great on that question, because in the last year and a half, we literally did a study on our culture where we surveyed thousands of people outside of the company and thousands of people inside the company. Who is ADP? Why do you like working here? Why would you consider working here? We got tremendous information, and what came back, the headlines of really what it came back with was both sides, internal, external. Friendly company to work with, not bureaucratic, very open, move fast, get things done, and respectful. And the biggest one was people were very proud to do the work that we do and how we help companies, that outsource piece, very proud and purposeful work, which I know is important to millennials and the new generation coming up as well. So many of you are, I'm thinking millennials, I guess. I hope I'm close, but you get the point. So we just did that study, and it helped us because, as Matt said, when you're inside, I'd rather not. I'd let others answer it. So we've got some very good information. So what we've done with that now is we've put a lot of video content out on our career site, allowing people to describe who we are, and it does kind of circle around that. Now, the key point there too is on your culture. If you're going to sell that culture, I'm back to the talent acquisition thing. If that's the concept you're going to project on your sites and your conversations, your interviews, you certainly better deliver it when they get in the door too. So it has to be very respectful and truthful and fair and transparent. So I hope that helps.
I might just want to add one small bit. Avoid the colossal failure, right? Go after the smart failure. Right? Go after. There's a big difference, right? Be measured, be thoughtful, take smart risks. That'll pay off.
And one of the ways to avoid the colossal failure is fail quickly. Mm-hmm. In other words, the big failures in industries are the hidden failures. So we failed, we hid, we kept failing, we hid, exactly, and then the world collapses. And the number one lesson that I'm sure your parents told you from very young, you can fail once, do the same thing again, then you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah.
By that I mean you're not working for me. Yeah. I want to have one last question for all of you, if you don't mind, and then we're going to open it up. And a question goes about when you get people to come to work for you. Most organisations, especially large companies, are trying to find outstanding talent. What processes do you have in place when you get this group of people to find the likely future leaders? In other words, do you let it happen, or do you spy them early and push them hard?
Start.
Want to start? Go ahead.
Yeah.
So look, we've I'm sure we all have a number of different initiatives that we take, and we target different groups at different points in their career. We've got programs for MBA students. We've got programs for juniors and seniors. We've got things that are beginning to start at high school level. Most organizations are going to be quite thoughtful about what it is that we're trying to hire for. We've gone through an exhaustive effort to define very specifically the competencies, not only that we think we want, but that we know through research and science are correlated to success at Goldman Sachs. And so we'll do quite a bit of, analysis and research, and then you'll go through and identify, different measures, and practices to try and, kind of suss those qualities or capabilities out. And so sometimes you'll do a personality test, which is really about, the different competencies that you have. Some organizations will do cognitive tests, which is, kind of more, IQ. We don't do those. Depending on, how technical the job is, we might have a coding test or a math test. There's going to be an actual structured interview where we're going to ask you specific questions, that are situational and behavioral. We're going to bring you in person. But we're, throughout the, it's not just random, and, we'll kind of see how it goes. We're being methodical. Questions that are being asked for a reason. We're capturing that data. We're going back and saying a year later, are the things that we're testing for making sense? And that's not to, say that that'll come off as so there's a formula. There's a way to get a job, and that's absolutely not the case. Our 2018, global campus class was 2,500 folks, and the different backgrounds that came in, just were across the range. But, we go through an exercise to correlate, capability and, different skills to long-term success.
So I'd say we have multiple of tools and processes to assess potential and top talent. At the executive levels, we're very consistent. We meet with the chairman twice a year. We use something called the 9 block, which measures your potential and your performance, and you're plotted on that. And we then determine actions, and we will then follow 6 months later with the chairman to say, how's the person faring against those actions? We may put those that we consider to be high potential in new experiences. So again, to test them, to test their learning agility. So I'd say that's a probably much more structured, consistent process down to the vice president level. In some of our areas, we repeat that process with the 9-block lower down. It's not a tool that has to be used at the executive level. We have programs with assessments that we will put individuals through. And then sometimes the individuals that we think are top talent don't fare well in those programs. And they either self-select out or we select them out. And then I'd say at the entry level, and I have Stephanie here from our campus team, so we have programs where we specifically recruit for what we to be top talent in some of our entry-level rotation programs, whether it be our investment analysts, our finance program. I think there's several programs within the investment groups. And those hires are really evaluated consistently. Some areas do it every 6 months where they're talking about the potential, they're talking about the fit of the individual, and those that rise to the top of that class or that pool will get different opportunities, again, to test our thinking of, are you truly high potential, and are you truly someone that we are going to invest in as part of our pipeline for the future?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, I think I'll try to take it to a practical sense too for you is that when you join a company, obviously you have to work your way to get in, and we described a lot of that. But then once you're in the company, as Sue and Matt described, and us too, you start to build a career inside the company. So you build a brand. You're building a brand from day one. And then that brand starts to get documented, and there's various ways it gets documented. So, and I think you're all comfortable with this because you're going for your MBA. So people keep score in business, right? So your best preparation for your next role is accomplishment. That will always be the answer, right? Accomplishment, point to it. Matt said being able to articulate your accomplishments, that's the best preparation for an interview or your next role. But when you're in the company, so we'll inventory you in a very positive way. And then as Sue said, inventory your talents, what your capabilities are, and most importantly, what your interests are. And then advise and guide, and those talents are constantly being assessed. So again, the best preparation is when you get into, and most of you are working now, whether it's a place you're going to settle in or not, as I said before, run to fires, accomplish whatever you can in that role so that either in that company or your next conversation with another company, you can demonstrate accomplishment and then articulate it. And that'll be, by the way, the best way to articulate it, all you have to do is show it, right? You have it, you did it, show it. So again, that would be the best advice I could give. And all that keeps going throughout your entire career. We actually have, you could have an executive at a company like myself. If I were to now advance, say, to even a higher role, I might have to take a 2-day assessment. 2-day assessment that further analyzes my skills and abilities to do that next role. So we do that. That's the level of how we study accomplishment. And I don't want that to intimidate anybody. I would say that so that you embrace it and get comfortable with being uncomfortable as you accomplish and then articulate it.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the topic. As always, please email your topics of interest to felicianobiz@montclair.edu or message us on social media. New discussions will be released soon, so be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play. The Business Edge is brought to you by the Feliciano School of Business at Montclair State University. Until next time, I'm Erin Blake. Thanks for listening.